Okay, let's try this again. Frog skeleton. Designed really for jumping. I think the last one cut off when I was talking about this flexible Euro style. Notice the short sacral vertebral column and the lightweight head here, which allows for more balance. You see those large orbital openings where the eyes bulge up out of the buccal cavity. Frogs basically eat insects as adults. They are carnivorous. A lot of them have unique glandular secretions of different poisons, which they will give warning if they are poisonous largely to their bright aposematic color. Some local examples would be the pickerel frog and the corpse-gray tree frog are ones that they have a little yellow flash under their hind limbs, and you get that in your eyes, it is definitely unpleasant. Another frog character is these vocal pouches. They use to pump air over their vocal cords to make different calls. So you can learn, and if you get into this, you really do want to learn frog calls because a lot of times you won't see the animal, but you can hear them. And there's all very unique calls. And in vocal pouches too, some have large, big sacs on the side of their head. Some have a big vocal pouch in the front. A lot of diversity there, not surprisingly. Other diversity is in how frogs move around, how they locomote, which is related to their shape. Obviously, form equals function. Look at some extremes here. They have short hind limb and long forelimbs. This suggests that they are more of a walking species. These would be I don't know if you've ever been to the Atlanta Botanical Garden or the zoo and watched the poison dart frogs get around, but they basically walk around more than they do hop. The bottom camera, I think this is your rain frog here, and the way they move is quite unique, that they have these short little legs. They don't move a lot, honestly, because largely they are burrowers and they spend most of their time underground. The more active species here are going to have more of the long hind limbs. Breeding wise, some really neat adaptations here and a lot of diversity. In the tropics, you'll find a lot of these species that will lay their egg clutch up underneath the edge of a leaf, and they hatch and they drop down into a nearby stream. In Asia, and here in the Americas too, in the tropics, a lot of foam nesters, and the male and female will kind of whip up this type of protein into a foam nest where they lay their eggs that are protected them until they hatch. I'm not sure, but I think this is probably the Darwin's frog, which lay their eggs in the vocal sacs of the male and brood the babies inside of their vocal sacs. You can't make this stuff up. Poison dart frogs oftentimes carry their tadpoles around on the back, and some of these frogs, this is I think Xenopus and maybe Ceratophrys or something, the female takes the fertilized eggs up on her back, the male pushes them up on there, and then her skin, I guess it's probably an inflammatory type of thing, the skin grows up and around, envelops the eggs, and then she carries them around on her back until they hatch out of these little pores. Phew, amazing. Okay, the Sicilians. I don't know. No offense to the Italian-American community here. Many fewer species. I updated these numbers yesterday for the amphibians, and it's interesting that the salamanders and frogs grew by hundreds of species since the last time I updated this, whereas the gymnophyonids have really not grown, and I think that is a function of two things. One is where they live. They live in places that there's not a lot of folks that have the luxury of going out and identifying and classifying amphibians. And the other thing is where they live. They're either burrowers or they're aquatic. So they're out of sight, cryptic habitats and parts of the world that they're difficult to study, but they are seriously really cool animals. You can make a whole career out of studying these things. About 1 meter in size. They have no legs. They have some remnants of scales, actually. So, always exceptions to the rules in terms of the naked skin of amphibians. They have tentacles. Some of them have eyes on their tentacles. Some lack eyes completely, which makes sense given their fossorial habits. There's some pictures of these things. I mean, goodness gracious. Purples, oranges. This is the female with her offspring. This is a baby. Look at these huge gills that help them while they're inside of the female to obtain oxygen, probably from her bloodstream. And actually the larval Sicilians live in the oviduct of the female and scrape the oviduct and get some nutritious, tasty morsels there. Amphibian life history. We saw those courtships with pheromones, but then all the different frogs with vocalizations. Frogs, external fertilization. Salamanders, internal, and I'm pretty sure the Sicilians have internal fertilization too. You see, most are egg layers. Some give live birth, viviparity, and then there are a few that are ovoviviparous. Even frogs. Diversity too in parental care. There are some that just dump and go, others that carry their babies around in their mouth. A lot of the salamanders guard their nests before they hatch. And actually, the Japanese giant salamander, they're good dads. They kick the mom out and sit in this giant clutch of eggs and aerate them and pluck out fungally infected eggs. They wait till they hatch and they'll stay in there, shifting back and forth to aerate the larvae. And they stay with them until the spring. They're breeding right now, in fact. I just talked to my friend Sumio, and so lots of neat variation in here. Totally aquatic, mud puddles, moist soil. There are salamanders in the western U.S. that never ever come down out of their trees. They don't have any need for standing water. Oh, metamorphosis. The larvae can be filter feeders, they can be herbivorous, they can be largely frog larvae are usually herbivorous, some are carnivorous. Salamanders, the larvae are carnivores. Adults, I mean, think about the amount of morphological change and the loss of gills, gain of limbs for tadpoles, and gain eyes. Usually their entire gastrointestinal tract changes from a diet of basically cellulose-rich things like algae to carnivore to eating meat, which is a relatively easy thing to digest. So hormonal endocrine system controls these changes. Apoptosis, where they tail shortens and the limbs grow. Mouth parts change from these little scraping mouth parts in a tadpole to jaws and teeth and terrestrial transformed juveniles. Really remarkable changes here. Okay, this is a theme that we'll look at as we proceed through the rest of the tetrapods here, is how do they obtain oxygen and pump the blood around. Larvae use gills to extract the oxygen from the water. A lot of adults use moist skin. So most of the salamanders you're learning about are in the family Parthodontidae, though you don't need to know the family. And they breathe through their skin. That's a cutaneous breathing. And even the frogs still utilize cutaneous breathing. But there are a lot of amphibians with lungs. They gulp air. You'll see their little gular pouch moving up and down and pumping air, gulping air down to the lungs. They don't have a diaphragm to expand their whole rib cage, right? And we'll see they have 3 chambers, 2 atria and a ventricle, and there is some mixing in that one ventricle, right? The oxygen poor blood comes into the right atrium, down to the ventricle, and then out to the left atrium, and we do have some partial mixing. But there's really an interesting situation for amphibians. They have two different cycles of blood flow. On the left, we see there are 2 flows. We have the dark arrows is the deoxygenated blood coming in from the systemic loop or from the body. It is then pumped out to the pulmonary loop, to the lungs, comes back to the heart, oxygen rich, and it goes out to the body, oxygen rich. Right. With a little bit of mixing down here in the one ventricle. But if the amphibian is in a low oxygen situation, such as underwater during wintering or underwater just in a day-to-day situation, they can close off the pulmonary loop and they send the blood out to the skin, and then from the skin it goes around to the rest of the body and then back to the heart. So they skip the lungs and basically revert to a single loop, a lot more like a fish actually. And so that's just an interesting amphibian thing. Osmotic balance, a lot of reliance again on the skin here. Skin is an amazing organ in the immune system and respiratory and osmotic systems of amphibians. They have little patches. Sometimes if you pick up a toad, you'll see a very vascularized, moist patch under their groin that is able to absorb dew right from the environment. Lots of this to me is a very cool whole section of amphibian biology that is underexplored. They produce think about it. You have this moist membrane, their skin, that's in contact with the environment all the time. The environment's full of bacteria, full of viruses, yet these animals are able to exist there. Right. I'm gonna shut this one off and we'll do one more video.